Hi, welcome to our lecture video. This is Professor Casada. Each technological development in media improves and increases its reach in the mass market and its influence. This is the Altair 8800, a microcomputer designed in 1974. You read about it in the textbook. The Altair 8800 was the product that catalyzed the microcomputer revolution of the 1970s. It was the first commercially successful personal computer. The first programming language for the machine was Microsoft's founding product, Altair Basic. The Altair 8800 had no built-in screen or video output, so it would have to be connected to a terminal. It took the telephone 75 years to reach 50 million users. It took television 13 years. It took the web just 5. The textbook examines the development of the internet and the technology to make it useful. In this lecture, we will look at how the internet influenced media development and American society. The internet provided new platforms for content creation and distribution. It allowed people to consume news and entertainment at their convenience. Social media allowed sharing and shaping public opinion. And the traditional media tried to stay relevant and reach a wider audience. And finally, the internet gave individuals the ability to report and share news or information firsthand. Most people now get their news information online, specifically from social media. Here you can see where people get their news. In a recent survey, 50% of internet users surveyed said that they hear about the latest news via social media before ever hearing about it on a news station. Digital sources have become an important part of Americans' news diets, with social media playing a crucial role, particularly for younger adults. Overall, just over half of U.S. adults, 54%, say they at least sometimes get news from social media, up slightly compared with the last few years. According to Pew Research Center, some social media sites, despite having relatively small overall audiences, stand out as destinations for news among many of their users. For example, 59% of X users get news there, as do a similar share of users on Truth Social, 57%, the site owned by former President Donald Trump. On the other hand, only 14% of LinkedIn users regularly get news on that platform. About half of TikTok users, 52%, say they regularly get news on the site, up from 43% in 2023 and just 22% in 2020. The share of users who get news also has risen on several other sites, including YouTube and Instagram. There are demographic differences, such as by gender, who turns to social media sites regularly for news. Some partisan differences also arise when it comes to who regularly gets news on some social media sites. You have learned in other COMM classes and in the media that so-called mainstream media have suffered big hits in revenue and audience numbers because of the impact of the internet. That is a part of the story. Margot Suska, an American University professor of journalism and a former newspaper journalist, wrote a book based on her research of the last 20 years of ownership and investment in the American chain newspaper industry. She reveals an industry rocked less by external forces like loss and ad revenue and more by ownership and management obsessed with profit and beholden to private fund interests that feel no responsibility toward journalism or the public it is meant to serve. The Orange County Register, for example, is owned by Alden Global Capital. Suska writes that the newspaper chains purchased and squeezed by private equity firms like Alden Global Capital suffered massive hits that resulted in their current state of decay. Nationwide, the percentage of newspapers owned by private equity rose from 5% in 2001 to 23% in 2019. Some newspapers have been reduced to zombie versions of their former selves as the new owners have shaved them down to minimize costs, depriving readers of the comprehensive coverage they enjoyed in the golden age of newspapers. Conventional wisdom notes basically a two-step process. There was a loss of internet advertising, and then newspapers fell apart. But based on detailed reports on SEC records and bankruptcy documents, she writes about what was happening in boardrooms during and after that loss of advertising revenue crunch hit the newspaper industry. Newspaper executives, pressured by private equity investors, chose mergers and acquisitions as the strategy to face the digital future. It stacked debt as advertising losses also mounted. In the 1990s, newspaper stocks were the golden goose of any portfolio. Newspapers were steadily profitable, earning margins of up to 30%. Compare this to supermarkets, which have a earning margin of under 3%. She writes that if private investment funds kept their hands off, the local newspaper ecosystem would be better off. In 2021, the U.S. newspaper industry generated $20.9 billion in revenue with profit margins just below 4%. Sometimes you get an investor who thinks he can fix it. Sam Zell was an American billionaire businessman engaged in real estate investment. Zell acquired control of Tribune Media, owner of the Chicago Tribune, the Baltimore Sun, Newsday, the Hartford Courant, and other newspapers, as well as the Chicago Cubs and Wrigley Field. For the $8.2 billion acquisition, Zell only invested $315 million of his own money, all in the form of debt. In December 2008, less than a year after Zell acquired the company, due to the increased debt and the effects of the Great Recession, Tribune Media filed the largest bankruptcy in the history of the American media industry, listing $7.6 billion in assets against a debt of $13 billion. In January 2009, as part of the bankruptcy reorganization, Zell sold the Chicago Cubs, Wrigley Field. Zell relinquished control of the Tribune upon its emergence from bankruptcy in December 2012. This video clip shows the tension between the new owner and the staff of the Orlando Sentinel.
About revenue and the bottom line and all that, but I'm a journalist, so I kind of want to know what your viewpoints are on journalism and the role it plays in the community, because we're not the penny saver, we're a newspaper.
My attitude on journalism is very simple. I want to make enough money so I can afford you. It's really that simple, okay? You need to, in effect, help me by being a journalist that focuses on what our readers want and therefore generates more revenue. We understand unequivocally that the heart and soul of this business is the editorial side of the business. That's our content. But if we don't have the revenue, it doesn't really matter.
But what readers want are puppy dogs, and I mean, we also need to inform the community.
I'm sorry. I can't, you're giving me the classic, what I would call journalistic arrogance of deciding that puppies don't count. I don't know anything about puppies. What I'm interested in is how can we generate additional interest in our product and additional revenue so we can make our product better and better. And hopefully we get to the point where our revenue is so significant that we can do puppies and a rat. Okay? Fuck you.
So that's the state of news media in both print and digital. However, there's been a decrease in much of an article that people read. Most people will just scroll through their news feed and stumble upon relevant news content or information, but just read the headlines or a short video clip of the piece. An average visitor will only read an article for 15 seconds or less, and the average video watch time online is 10 seconds. However, social platforms have a control over what news and information we see. Our social media friends have become the managing editors deciding what we see. What if social media also affects how you perceive reality? Here's an excerpt of an interview between Coleman Hughes, author of The End of Race Politics, Arguments for a Colorblind America, and TV talk show host Bill Maher.
So, before 2013, you can just look at polling data from Gallup and Pew. The majority of Americans, black, white, and Hispanic, believed race relations were good as late as 2013. And that's the year everything takes a nosedive, so that by 2021, half as many people thought we were in a good place as thought that in 2013. So the question is what happened? Did racism suddenly spike? Well, no, the data is pretty clear on that. Racism didn't spike. What happened is that we all got smartphones and social media and started seeing unrepresentative video clips of cops, harassing or beating or killing black Americans. And this gave people the misperception that racism was suddenly this widespread problem, and it touched off all of these trends that we've now heard about for the past 8 years under various names: wokeness, CRT, DEI. It's all fundamentally from that core change in how information has been shared.
But there was part of that was good, that we did see these beatings and things go on, because that's what changed it.
The one thing I can say is good about it is before the Black Lives Matter movement in 2013, cops could basically do whatever and not get punished.
Right.
It's hard to find even a single example. You can find isolated ones, but mostly cops got away with whatever. So that's no longer the case, and that's the one thing I could credit.
And they go to jail.
Yeah.
I mean,
but on the other hand, it has not. Many people think it just revealed all the racism that's actually out there. That's not true, because if that were true, people would have an accurate assessment. And this has been tested. When you ask very liberal Americans, how many unarmed black people do you think are shot by the cops every year? The answer they gave in 2019 was 1,000. The real number from that year was 12. So this social media algorithmically boosted content it's not educating us, it's miseducating us.
So your perception of reality is not just shaped by politics, faith, education, family, and such. It is shaped by media consumption. We saw that with the colonial press, the penny press, yellow journalism, muckrakers, radio, film, and television. With social media in particular, and the internet in general, everyone becomes a publisher. Everyone becomes a reporter. But if everyone is a reporter, then nobody is. For example, an article needs to be liked and shared multiple times before many people see it in their feed. Therefore, social media and your social friends have control over what news pieces you see and what you do not. Your social friends and social media algorithms are publishers and reporters at the same time. You have to be careful how you choose your news.
How do you know what's happening in your world? The amount of information just a click away may be limitless, but the time and energy we have to absorb and evaluate it is not. All the information in the world won't be very useful unless you know how to read the news. To your grandparents, parents, or even older siblings, this idea would have sounded strange. Only a few decades ago, news was broad-based. Your choices were limited to a couple of general interest magazines and newspapers of record, and 3 or 4 TV networks, where trusted newscasters delivered the day's news at the same reliable time every evening. But the problems with this system soon became apparent as mass media spread. While it was known that authoritarian countries controlled and censored information, a series of scandals showed that democratic governments were also misleading the public, often with media cooperation. Revelations of covert wars, secret assassinations, and political corruption undermined public faith in official narratives presented by mainstream sources. This breakdown of trust in media gatekeepers led to alternative newspapers, radio shows, and cable news competing with the major outlets and covering events from various perspectives. More recently, the internet has multiplied the amount of information and viewpoints, with social media, blogs, and online video turning every citizen into a potential reporter. But if everyone is a reporter, nobody is, and different sources may disagree not only on opinions, but on the facts themselves. So how do you get the truth, or something close? One of the best ways is to get the original news unfiltered by middlemen. Instead of articles interpreting a scientific study or a politician's speech, you can often find the actual material and judge for yourself. For current events, follow reporters on social media. During major events such as the Arab Spring or the Ukrainian protests, newscasters and bloggers have posted updates and recordings from the midst of the chaos. Though many of these later appear in articles or broadcasts, keep in mind that these polished versions often combine the voice of the person who was there with the input of editors who weren't. At the same time, the more chaotic the story, the less you should try to follow it in real time. In events like terrorist attacks and natural disasters, today's media attempts continuous coverage even when no reliable new information is available, sometimes leading to incorrect information or false accusations of innocent people. It's easy to be anxious in such events, but try checking for the latest information at several points in the day rather than every few minutes, allowing time for complete details to emerge and false reports to be refuted. While good journalism aims for objectivity, media bias is often unavoidable. When you can't get the direct story, read coverage in multiple outlets, which employ different reporters and interview different experts. Tuning into various sources and noting the differences lets you put the pieces together for a more complete picture. It's also crucial to separate fact from opinion. Words like think, likely, or probably mean that the outlet is being careful, or worse, taking a guess. And watch out for reports that rely on anonymous sources. These could be people who have little connection to the story, or have an interest in influencing coverage, their anonymity making them unaccountable for the information they provide. Finally, and most importantly, try to verify news before spreading it. While social media has enabled the truth to reach us faster, it's also allowed rumors to spread before they can be verified, and falsehoods to survive long after they've been refuted. So before you share that unbelievable or outrageous news item, do a web search to find any additional information or context you might have missed, and what others are saying about it. Today, we are more free than ever from the old media gatekeepers who used to control the flow of information. But with freedom comes responsibility. The responsibility to curate our own experience and ensure that this flow does not become a flood, leaving us less informed than before we took the plunge.
It's all about credibility. People self-verify the news. When we only had print publications, people would justify position or repeating information by saying, "I read it in the newspaper." Then it was, "I heard it on the radio." Then, "I saw it on TV." Now it's, "I heard it on the podcast," or "I saw it on TikTok." But audiences do not use social media to see what is happening in the Middle East, in Congress, or in their community. If they do, it has been refashioned to fit a particular point of view or attract a particular crowd. The result is a mode of communication that appeals to our worst nature. It has increased the average American's access to political news, just not always the most balanced. It has created opportunities for two-way interactions between citizens and reporters, and that is through the comments section. Unfortunately, news websites do not curate their comments sections, allowing for substantial trolling. It is not necessarily constructive discourse. But the rise of the internet has not led to a better informed citizenry. So why? Well, the internet only makes the information available. People still need to actively seek it out. And people do not consult a wide range of sources. The internet has had both positive and negative impacts on traditional media outlets. It has provided opportunities for traditional media to reach a broader audience by establishing an online presence. Many print publications and television stations now have websites and social media accounts, allowing them to engage with their audience in new ways. Changes in technology is the one factor that has most expanded the media's role as watchdog. However, the rise of the internet has also presented challenges for traditional media outlets. The ease of access to online news sources has led to a decline in print newspaper sales and viewership of traditional television news. This has forced traditional media outlets to adapt and find new revenue streams, such as online subscriptions or advertising partnerships. The incoming Trump administration is floating the idea of opening the White House press corps to, quote, independent, end quote, journalists. That's code for sympathetic podcasters and influencers on the web who do not challenge the statements of the president or press secretary. Not only is consumption of traditional television news in print formats continuing to decline at a relentless rate, but online websites are also struggling to engage news users, despite the tumultuous times in which we live. These platform shifts are part of a wider move away from reading and towards watching or listening to news content online. While all wage groups say they still prefer to read news online because of the speed and control it offers, younger groups are more likely to express preferences for watching or listening to news content. This translates into greater consumption of short-form videos and podcasts by this group, according to studies. The current moment of the digital media industry in change could be ushering in the end of the modern internet. That is, a web mediated through large platforms like Google, Facebook, and X, filled with user-generated content and that help people navigate the web. Social media sites, search engines, and online marketplaces like Amazon are all part of the modern internet. But Twitter and Facebook shows the decline of this current version of the web. The discourse is overheated. Misinformation is rampant. It's hard to tell what's real and what's not anymore. Users are fleeing. News outlets can't trust the platforms. So what's next? Specialized newsletters and podcasts for niche audiences are rising in popularity. There are also more paid subscriptions instead of ad-dependent news sites, as well as communities around nerdy topics on platforms like Reddit and Discord. This shift from large social media platforms to smaller and smaller communities is going to continue, and with it, the big web companies will cede power. No matter how you look at it, the internet is changing. Federal prosecutors say Russia paid an American media company, Tenet Media, to push pro-Kremlin messages from social media influencers including Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, and Dave Rubin. Almost $10 million was paid to the web company. As the news media loses an audience, market share, and revenue, it also has lost the respect of anyone, current or past consumer. People don't trust the media, mostly because they have bought into the lies presented by their tribe or the group they belong to. That lie is the news media is not trustworthy. Many, quote, fake news, unquote, websites compete for attention with sensational headlines and ridiculous storylines that tend to get shared more often due to the lack of readers fact-checking or reading more than the headline. That means that authentic content is hard to come by now. In fact, fake news is actually more likely to spread than the truth. The people behind fake news is not just someone on the far end of the political spectrum. You can have foreign players in this as well. Think about this. If everyone is a reporter, then who are the gatekeepers? Who are the fact checkers? People blame the news media for publishing, quote, fake news, unquote. But is the distinction between credible news organizations and everyone else now just a blur? How can you spot fake news? It really starts with you.
Facebook, Google, and Twitter have announced new efforts to stop the spread of fake news. Twitter has amped up its mute and report functions to slow dissemination of fake news. But you shouldn't leave it up to these big websites to perfectly curate all your news to you all the time. Here are a few easy ways to spot fake news. 1. Double check the URL. Some fake sites look like they have legit URLs, but take a closer look. This site tries to fool readers into thinking it's ABC News. but the web address is a few letters off. It was abcnews.com.co instead of abcnews.go.com, the real one. .co is the country code for Colombia. 2. Does the photo you're looking at seem photoshopped or unrealistic? It could be. Drag and drop the photo you're looking at into Google Images, and it can help you verify the original source of the image. 3. Can you identify the original source of the information in the story? Check that source against other sources. If other reputable news outlets haven't picked up the story, it's likely you're looking at fake news. Here are some sites we've seen deliver fake news. 4. Think about installing a Chrome extension to help you detect fake news. The plugin called Fib, Stop Living a Lie, was recently developed by 4 Princeton University students and can help you determine the validity of some news links. The plugin purports to verify pictures, text, tweets, and embedded links. It also checks the site for malware and dead links. Other Chrome extensions like BS Detector and Fake News Alert say they do similar things. Before you send an article to all your friends on social media, consider visiting ideas 1 through 4. You'll thank us later.
Okay, so we try to be smart about what news we consume and which sites we visit. While these AI tools may enable new means of expressing creativity, the spread of computer-generated media also threatens to further pollute the information ecosystem. That risks adding to the challenges for users, news organizations, and social media platforms to vet what's real after years of grappling with online misinformation featuring far less sophisticated visuals. There are also concerns that AI-generated images such as these of people could be used for harassment or to further drive divided internet users apart. What's more, coordinated bad actors could eventually attempt to create fake content in bulk or suggest that real content is computer-generated in order to confuse internet users and provoke certain behaviors. So here we are discussing how the internet revolution impacted society. But while we have been looking at computer technology in general, we ought to be looking at the one device that gets us to the good, the bad, and the ugly of the internet. So you probably have your phone by you on your desk. Just take a look and just think about what's the one feature that you love? What's the one feature you cannot live without? You have a lot of tech in your hand. It was not always that way.
It was 40 years ago that the first cell phone call was made. Before this, there were car phones. They functioned more like radios. But the first call from a handheld cell phone came in 1973. Who made it? This man, Martin Cooper, general manager of Motorola Communications Systems Division. Whom did he call? His chief competitor at Bell Labs. There weren't any other cell phones then, so he dialed through to a landline. Bell Labs had first proposed the idea of a cellular system in 1947 and was working to create the first network. When did cell phones hit the market? That wasn't until 1984. The Dynatac phone offered 30 minutes of talk time.
This is AC's guidance counselor at Bayside.
Zach Morris, the character from Saved by the Bell, was always getting in trouble with Principal Belding for using it at school. It also became a symbol of ostentatious luxury enjoyed by the likes of Gordon Gekko and Wall Street. What came next? Other models and manufacturers emerged. Then presidential candidate Bill Clinton used one during his 1992 campaign. The same year, the 2G network was introduced, allowing for text messaging. By 1999, Finland's Nokia was the leader in the market, selling 79 million mobile phones worldwide, a lead it kept until 2012. When did it get sleek? The Motorola Razr, introduced in 2004, broke through as the hot new clamshell or flip phone. The competition to make cell phones stylish was on. When did they get smart? The vast communication possibilities of cell phones beyond just gabbing became clear with the BlackBerry. It started out as a texting device in 1999, but became a souped-up cell phone in 2003, boasting of email and internet access. 4 years later, Steve Jobs introduced Apple's new iPhone, and the rest, as they say, is history. That's the short answer.
How many of you could not survive without your phone? How many of you could go a day without your cell phone? 2 days, a week? Could you wake up in the morning without looking at your phone? But people did survive without the cell phone. But since 2007, the cell phone has become the indispensable tool of our lives. I have a phone, therefore I am. You see, the cell phone is designed to be addictive.
I can't stop looking at my phone. But I'm not alone. Over 2.5 billion people have smartphones now, and a lot of them are having a hard time putting them down.
There's a new app that aims to curb phone addiction.
Addiction is money.
Are we a nation of smartphone addicts?
The problem is, our devices are designed to keep us engaged. They're intentionally addicting. But if you understand the tricks that grab your attention, you can learn to have a healthier relationship with your phone.
I think we're living inside of 2 billion Truman shows where, Truman Show, you wake up and everything is sort of coordinated just for you and you usually don't even realize it. But it's coordinating just to entertain you or just to engage you.
That's Tristan Harris. He worked as Google's design ethicist, and now he runs a nonprofit initiative called Time Well Spent, advocating for awareness of how tech companies profit off of users' attention.
It's not designed to help us, it's just designed to keep us hooked.
So I handed him my phone
Yeah.
and asked him how he'd fix it. It starts with turning off all notifications, except for when a real human is trying to reach you. When you get a call, a text, or a message, it's usually because another person wants to communicate with you. But a lot of today's apps simulate the feeling of that kind of social interaction to get you to spend more time on their platform. If Facebook sends you a push notification that a friend is interested in an event near you, they're essentially acting like a puppet master, leveraging your desire for social connection so that you use the app more. But notifications didn't always work like this. When push notifications were first introduced for email on BlackBerrys in 2003, they were actually seen as a way for you to check your phone less. You could easily see emails as they came in, so you didn't have to repeatedly open your phone to refresh an inbox. But today you can get notifications from any app on your phone. So every time you check it, you get this grab bag of notifications that can make you feel a broad variety of emotions.
If it wasn't random, if it was predictably bad or predictably good, then you would not get addicted. The predictability would take out the addictiveness.
That's the same logic behind slot machines. And it's effective. Slot machines make more money in the US than baseball, movies, and theme parks combined. And they become addicting about 3 to 4 times faster than other kinds of gambling. Some apps even replicate the process of pulling a slot machine lever with the pull to refresh feature. That's a conscious design choice. Those apps are usually capable of continuously updating content, but the pull action provides an addicting illusion of control over that process. In the future, we might see healthier ways of delivering notifications. Research shows that bundling notifications, where phones deliver a batch of updates at set times, reduces user stress. Then, you have to grayscale your screen. The easiest way to attract your eye's attention on a screen is through color. Human eyes are sensitive to warm colors. In eye tracking tests like this one, they gravitate particularly to bright red. That's why so many apps have redesigned their icons to be brighter, bolder, and warmer over the years. It's also why notification bubbles are red. A little icon like this, or this, doesn't have the same impact on your attention as this. But you can neutralize that distracting effect by selecting a grayscale color filter in your phone's accessibility settings. When you make everything black and white, your brain isn't tricked into thinking this is any more important to you than this.
I mean, there's a reason why slot machines are, bright in color and have flashing lights and ding, 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 ding. They have the sensory input too, right? And so just noticing that if I take out the color, it changes the some of the addictiveness.
Finally, restrict your home screen to everyday tools.
Make sure that your home screen, when you unlock it, doesn't have anything except for the in-the-moment tools that help you live your life. I have Lyft to get somewhere when I need to get somewhere, maps, calendar. None of these are apps that I can fall into and then get sucked down in some bottomless vortex of stuff.
If you're not sure what counts as a bottomless vortex of stuff, it helps to filter out apps that use infinite scrolling. Unlike pagination, where users have to click to load new content on another page, infinite scrolling continuously loads new material, so there's no built-in endpoint. Video autoplay works in a similar way. These interfaces create a frictionless experience, but they also reduce a user's sense of control and make it harder to stop. Research shows that people rely on visual cues more than internal cues to stop consuming something. In a 2005 study, individuals who ate soup out of a self-refilling bowl ate 73% more than those who ate out of a normal bowl filled up by servers. But those who ate from the self-refilling bowls didn't feel any more satisfied. So a visual cue, like an endpoint, is better at telling you the right time to stop than your own sense of satisfaction. And because so many apps don't have an endpoint, you have to build your home screen around the eventuality of distraction. We check our phones a lot. Most of us drastically underestimate how often we do so. But technology might not always look this way. There are ideas for alternative interfaces that give you functional choices and are more transparent about how much time you'll lose with one action versus another.
But it's a really deep philosophical question of what is genuinely worth your attention on an interruptive basis? Do people even know how to answer that question? It's a really hard question. It's not something we think about.
The textbook dropped a lot of names in the history of computers and the web, nearly all male names. But did you know that computers wore skirts? No, really. The first computers were women, female computers, as in computing mathematical equations. Someone who computes mathematical formulas was known as a computer. By the early 20th century, computing was thought of as women's work, and computers, the people, not machines, were assumed to be female. Respected mathematicians would describe the problem-solving horsepower of computing machines in girl years and describe a unit of machine label as equal to 1 kilogirl. Today, we think of computer science as a field dominated by men, but the women have a long and important history in the field. In fact, women were many of the first computer programmers, playing a hugely important part in the development of computing during World War II and the space race, and ran one of the first computer software companies. That's Annie Isley at NASA in the big picture. Top left is Margaret Hamilton in 1969, standing next to listings of the software she and her MIT team produced for the Apollo space program. The photo is the women of ENIAC. So what changed? Today, there are few women in computer science, even fewer of women of color. Here's why.
Today, 73% of the field of computer science is comprised of men. But women have a long history in computing, so why don't we know their stories? And how did the number of women in the field drop so low? Hidden Figures, both the film and the book, introduce audiences around the world to some of the women who worked as engineers and early human computers, aka advanced mathematicians at NASA. And these weren't the only singular figures, since for a good portion of computing history, women played a significant role. But today, women are underrepresented in computer science, and we are rarely shown images of women in the field. But even though this is our present reality, it wasn't always the case. So first we need to ask ourselves, were there any women in early computing history? The short and resounding answer to that question is yes. Women were an integral part of computer science from its earliest inceptions. For example, mathematician Ada Lovelace is still considered the world's first computer programmer for her collaboration with Charles Babbage on his designs for a digital programmable computer called the Analytic Engine. And that was as early as 1842, even though the machine was never built and her insights couldn't be tested at the time. And throughout the 20th century, there were numerous well-known women in the fields of computer science and programming, including the three featured in Hidden Figures, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, whose work was instrumental in promoting US interests during the space race. Other noted figures include computer scientist and US Navy Rear Admiral Dr. Grace Hopper, who was one of the first programmers on the Harvard Mark I computer. In 1958, Elsie Schutt opened COMM Inc., one of the first software companies in the world, and it was staffed entirely by women. In 1946, 6 women programmed the ENIAC computer at the University of Pennsylvania, which was the first electronic and programmable computer. But when the project was revealed to the public that same year, the 6 women's names were left out of the story. But the reality is that in the early half of the 20th century, especially after World War II, many women were encouraged to enter the field as human computers or expert mathematicians. That's in part because with so many men enlisted to fight during the war, jobs in many fields were looking to hire women women to fill those vacancies, and computer science and programming were no different. In fact, the ENIAC computer was a project run by the US Army, and it could be used to run ballistic trajectories. So, as the war raged on, women with degrees in math were in high demand to start working in the field as mathematicians and early programmers, many of whom were self-taught. In fact, after the 1960s, the number of women in computer science was on the rise, with women majoring in computer science rising steadily from 1960 until about 1984. That's in part because of the increased job opportunities in the field, and in part because women were actively encouraged to enter it. But the reason computer programming was seen as a field that was natural for women was due to outdated and sexist ideas about the kinds of jobs that women were suited for. At the time, men considered building computer hardware to be the real skill-oriented or challenging job, while relegating computer programming to skills they associated with secretarial labor, like typing, filing, and operating a telephone switchboard. In 1967, Cosmopolitan magazine ran an article titled "The Computer Girls" about how smart and savvy modern women could enter the field as computer programmers in order to earn higher wages. So male engineers were assigned roles developing computer hardware, and women were responsible for a good deal of the programming. So that brings us to our next question. If women played a significant role in early programming, then when did we start assuming that computer programming could only be done by men? Well, that all began to change around the end of the 1960s. Men in computer programming looked to increase the visibility of their field and advance their own positions, and part of that strategy included decreasing the number of women. They created their own professional organizations and educational requirements to exclude the women already working as programmers and discourage new women from entering the field. There were male bias tests, including a skewed personality test that basically equated presumably masculine traits with programmers, and exams where men shared the answers with other men in their professional associations. And computer industry ad campaigns ran sexist slogans that claimed that women were linked to human error and inefficiency, despite the fact that many of them pioneered computer programming. But this occurred decades ago, so that brings us to our final question. Why is there still such a large gap in the number of men versus women in computer programming related fields, and why is the field represented as male-centric today? Well, according to NPR's Planet Money, this all started to shift around 1984. As home computers and video games entered the market, ad campaigns were run that represented these new innovations as toys and devices that should be targeted towards young boys. In fact, these ads focused almost exclusively on getting young boys interested in owning computers or working in that field. In 1984, 37% of computer science majors were women. By 2014, that number had dropped to 18%. And a recent study of data from GitHub, a San Francisco-based open source software community, found that women's coding suggestions were more likely to be approved and shared on the site over those suggested by men, but only if their gender wasn't revealed. And if you're worried about the sample size, the researchers analyzed 1.4 million members. But a recent study shows that girls who have inspiring and encouraging teachers in computer-related classes as early as middle school are far more likely to enter the field later in life.
What if AI could heal this country? And so concludes our lecture video. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll talk to you next week. It's our last week together. Thank you. If you have any questions, please reach out to me on email or through Canvas. Thank you.